Hey everyone, it's Dr. Liz, and I've been posting essays every day for National Adoptee Awareness Month. And today I'm going to switch it up a little bit, and I thought I would read my essay instead of posting the text version. But if you want the text version, let me know and I'll post it separately. Today is day 18 of National Adoptee Awareness Month, and today I wrote about the lies that I believed because I was conditioned to abandon myself. And I think this is something that's true for a lot of us. Um, for most adoptees, gaslighting doesn't start in adulthood, it begins in childhood. It starts in the family system that tells us that we're being too sensitive instead of helping us to hold our grief, or tells us that our questions are ungrateful and that our instincts are wrong. It starts in that subtle but repeated message: don't trust yourself, trust us. And so adoptees learn early on that belonging depends on compliance. We become experts at shapeshifting, at performing the version of ourselves that keeps the peace. And we get really good at staying quiet so we won't be left again. And that kind of conditioning doesn't stay confined to childhood. It follows us into adulthood, into friendships, into workplaces, and especially into relationships. One of the passages in the original version of Unmothered that still breaks my heart to read out loud, and in fact, as I was pulling it out to write this, it made me tear up again. It's about my first marriage. And at the time, I didn't have language for what was happening. I only knew what that I was disappearing inside my own life. Here's the text from the show. In the span of 3 short years, I became a shell of myself. His emotional and psychological abuse drove me to the very edge. He confiscated my favorite pair of jeans because they were too tight. He hid them under a pile of clothes. He told me what I was and wasn't allowed to wear. My body, the one that I had finally learned to be proud of, became a prison. I could no longer own myself. It took me years to understand that the gaslighting felt so familiar because I had already been trained not to trust myself. I had already learned to question my reality, to silence my own needs. I had already learned that my body was not fully mine. And I had already learned that love required self erasure. That marriage didn't create those wounds, it exposed them. And gaslighting works on people who are taught to doubt themselves, and adoptees are primed for it. When I finally left him, I didn't just leave a marriage. I left a lifelong pattern, a pattern of choosing love that felt like pain, a pattern of equating abandonment with attachment, a pattern of mistaking control for care, and a pattern of believing that I had to tolerate harm to avoid being alone. It wasn't until I began reading The Primal Wound that I saw clearly the link between adoption, trauma, and the choices that I kept making in relationships. I wasn't broken. I was reenacting the earliest story that my nervous system knew, which was you must earn love by disappearing. So to heal, I had to unlearn the lies that love is something I have to chase, that attention is conditional, that my worth is measured by how little space I take up, that my pain is an inconvenience, that safety comes from obedience, and that silence keeps relationships intact. None of these things were ever true. They were coping strategies born from a system that asks adopted people to sacrifice parts of ourselves in order to belong. Finding the center of myself and truly becoming the subject of my own life required choosing myself over and over again, even when it felt terrifying. And let me tell you, it felt terrifying. Even when it meant leaving relationships, rewriting narratives, and confronting my own patterns. And I'm going to tell you something. The truth is, I wasn't unlovable. I wasn't unre- I wasn't unlovable. I was unreflected. I was unwitnessed and I was untethered. Healing tethered me back to myself. So, if you're an adoptee, what did you have to unlearn? before you could choose yourself? If you're not an adoptee, how might you recognize the difference between someone overreacting and someone reliving a wound that was created long before you met them? Follow me for more tips and more stories each day of this month and beyond. You can find me on my website, lizdebetta.com, or you can follow me on social media at dr.liz.debetta. And I'll see you next time.